Welcome to another episode of Heart to Heart. I'm Dr. Jeff Gold, and I have the honor of serving as the president here at the University of Nebraska. And I'm so pleased to host this series where we have the opportunity to connect one-on-one with students, faculty, alumni, and with leaders across our state and across the nation. And today, I'm particularly honored to welcome our guest. The Honorable Deborah Wince-Smith is the President and the Chief Executive Officer of the Council on Competitiveness. The Council is a nonpartisan leadership coalition of chief executive officers, university presidents, business leaders, and national laboratory directors. They're committed to developing national policy solutions and initiatives to drive future productivity and growth, prosperity, for all Americans and for global success of American businesses. Ms. Wince-Smith assumed the leadership role of the Council on Competitiveness after an incredibly distinguished career as a senior U.S. government official. She's also been active in the governance of various national scientific laboratories as well. She provided strategic counsel to several hundred Fortune 100 companies and served as a number of corporate and nonprofit boards of directors, advisory committees, and philanthropic organizations. As an internationally renowned leader and a voice and an expert on competitiveness policy, innovation, and strategy, driving international economic policy. Ms. Wince-Smith has recharged the national debate on America's competitiveness, which of course underlies our future. Deborah, welcome to Heart to Heart. It's so great to have you with us on this broadcast.
Thank you, Dr. Gold, and thank you for your tremendous leadership as a member of the National Innovation Commission of the Council and on our executive committee, and soon to be host of one of our national competitiveness conversations that we'll be convening with you in Omaha at the end of April.
Well, it's great to have this conversation today in advance of that. So before we talk about the council and the conversations that we've had, our audience is always interested in your background. You know, I touched on a few of the high points, but you know, there are students and young women and young men in early stages of their careers who listen to these podcasts, and they always wonder how people who rise to such incredible levels of prominence and reputation and success as you have, you know, how did you get started and what was that journey like?
Well, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, and you, of course, being a distinguished doctor, my father was an internist, so I grew up in a doctor's family. But from the time I was a little girl, I was fascinated with ancient civilizations, and I ended up going to then all-women's school in New York, Vassar College, and studying archaeology and anthropology and ancient history, and went on to get a graduate degree in classical archaeology and Aegean Bronze Age archaeology from Cambridge University. So here I am, you know, an archaeologist. I had the great opportunity to excavate at a late Bronze Age site in Greece in the mid 1970s, and so my journey really has been, in some ways, and I'll use your beautiful framing of the odyssey to extraordinary, your initiatives at University of Nebraska system. I've had an odyssey as well, because from England and Greece, I traveled to Pakistan and India. And one of the things I tell young people, I still know that my parents weren't happy. I crossed the Khyber Pass by myself from Pakistan into Afghanistan to study ancient coinage and the presence of Alexander the Great. So often I get the question, how could somebody with a background in archaeology end up working in international economic policy and competitiveness in the United States? And that's been a journey in itself.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. But, you know, I think it makes a very important point and by the way, not totally different than how somebody who spent 25 years doing cardiac surgery can become a university president. You know, stuff of that nature does happen. But people need to be open to experiences, to be mentored, and to not be afraid to change course when unique opportunities present themselves. So, for the benefit of our audience, how do you define competitiveness, and why is it so important to the future of our nation?
Well, the whole theme of competitiveness really emerged in the 1980s during the very intense trade and technology competition and rivalry between the US and Japan. We weren't really using that term, competitiveness, and it became really the overarching definitive platform to begin to define what did we need to do as a nation to ensure, yes, our economic prowess, the success of our companies globally, but also our national security. So the competitiveness movement, and I had the great privilege and honor to be part of shaping this when I served in the Reagan White House. We defined competitiveness really as a nation's ability to increase its productivity while growing and expanding the standard of living for all its citizens and succeeding in international marketplaces. So productivity, expanding and increasing quality of life, prosperity for all citizens, and succeeding globally. And over the years, we have really added the important critical dimension of national security, because that also pervades competitiveness. Without having a national secure nation and regions and world, it's very hard to thrive and flourish in an ever changing global economy.
And as you've mentioned earlier, I've had the honor for several years now of participating under your leadership with the Council. And maybe I think the audience would be appreciative to understand what the Council's role is in all of this, a little bit of the history, but also how it's dynamic and in many ways proactive in trying to chart a future and create a perhaps roadmap or blueprint as to where our nation and perhaps other parts of the world might be moving and should be moving.
Well, the Council has an interesting origin, and this year is particularly important for us because it's our 40th anniversary as a nonprofit, nonpartisan leadership organization. So with leaders such as yourself as university presidents, we are joined by CEOs from every sector of the economy, with our national laboratory directors and labor leaders as a C-suite organization that are committed to, yes, understanding and elucidating what are the trends and challenges that are shaping the future of America's competitiveness and security and prosperity. But most importantly, what do we do as a private sector leadership organization to work with government at the federal, state, local level, with partners throughout our country to create an action agenda to actually implement and carry forward the policies we need to make our country stronger and robust and more successful for all Americans. So while the definition of competitiveness, yes, it has evolved, but still at the end of the day, it's the issues and challenges that are constantly changing in a time of great turbulence, transition, and transformation that we're living now and in the years ahead.
Well, certainly it's a critically important role, and I think particularly at this time with all the geopolitical uncertainty that we face, that role will just continue to be super important. So are there a couple of national or global trends that might relate to either technology, workforce, or other aspects of competition that the Council is particularly focused on right now?
Well, one of the cross-cutting themes and almost in the DNA of the Council has always been our recognition that the United States must lead in the development and deployment at scale of the ever-emerging new knowledge and technologies that get converted into new products and services and provide, high-skilled jobs and employment for Americans, and of course, contribute to the global economy writ large. So now we are living in a time where these exponential technological capabilities that are just emerging and being deployed at warp speed is just ever accelerating. And we, of course, know that they've all really come around under that framework of the digital, the biotech, the nanotech, the cognitive revolutions, everything from, the emergence of and convergence of AI and quantum with biotechnology, with advanced materials, with hypersonics, et cetera. So these technologies are really at the heart of ensuring U.S. leadership. It doesn't mean that we have to be the leader in all of them, but we have to be the leader in the ones that are very much determining the future. And they are all dual use. They also all have a profound national security implication. So the council, through our group of chief technology officers and our National Innovation Commission, have really focused on ensuring that we have the talent, the investment, and the infrastructure to carry that dimension forward. But we also have to operate in an infrastructure of smart, effective, innovation-friendly regulation, access to capital, to have a good capital cost structure from tax policy, as well as to access to venture capital, and to ensure that we have, the enabling infrastructure, protection of intellectual property, digital cybersecurity, and all of these things come together into a national innovation ecosystem that we're working very hard to ensure is deep and broad throughout our country.
So lastly, the University of Nebraska and, all of our university partners are, of course, deeply involved in research, talent development, and economic growth in their own communities. I mean, we, for instance, in the state of Nebraska represent approximately 9% of the entire gross domestic product of the state at this current time. So how do you see the higher education system, and particularly the prominent R1 research universities, playing in this future game of competitiveness?
Well, our university system is absolutely a crown jewel in America's competitiveness assets, and has really been from the beginning of our universities when we became a nation 250 years ago, and celebrating that this year as well. And the universities really sit at the fulcrum of, yes, developing the new knowledge, technologies, but educating our future citizenry for whatever dimension of work they go into. But very importantly, around competitiveness, our universities are becoming the anchor for what we really define as place-making innovation. Not just place-based, but place-making innovation. These are the places with tremendous talent, with faculty, with students, with all the partnerships with the private sector that are developing these next generation assets for our country, and collaborating very, very closely with the governors, with the leaders in their states, and across regions as well. So, speaking of Nebraska, not only does the University of Nebraska system sit, at the apex of this in your state, but you have tremendous assets of national importance, certainly in the bioeconomy and manufacturing that we're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks, but also on national security. You've got a leading institution in AI and all of these things, but it's really how the university system writ large acts as the catalyst, the integrator, and really the engine for growth and development in our country. And this is why, in spite of some challenges we're facing on federal funding of R&D and other issues, our universities are still the magnet in the world to attract the best and brightest, but very importantly, to grow our own capacity and to educate more Americans to participate in the innovation economies of the future.
Well, so well said. That's as clear as it can possibly be. Well, I just want to say, as we close this podcast, of course, to thank you for your time today, to tell you how much we look forward to being with you here in Nebraska in a couple weeks, but also to tell you what a pleasure and an honor it is to serve on the council. I will tell you, when I first started, I wasn't really clear what I was getting into. One of my mentors and friends asked me and suggested that it would be a good thing for me to do. But let me tell you, it has been so worthwhile and such a true honor and pleasure. So thanks for being with us today. To our audience, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to the next time we're together.